And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is The Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. I came across this article today. Made me angry, made me sad, frustrated. A lot of things. A lot of things can't say out loud. It was about United Health. As you know, United Health is the nation's largest health insurance provider. And this story went into from a stat investigation that went into the fact that the largest insurance company was pressuring medical staff to cut off, certain things for seriously ill patients. Cutting off payments for stuff. All because they have this computer algorithm that tells them how things should go. Never mind what doctors and nurses and the professionals, never mind what they think. It's the computer algorithm. And they mandate that you stay within 1%. Now, you could deviate from the algorithm, but only 1%. 1%. And, it's one of these things that it's really, really just angering to me. Because it made me think back to when my grandmother passed. And, she was 86 years old. She led a full life. But I still come back to died too soon. She fell, broke her hip, and that was basically the end. Because when she went to the hospital, they did the surgery, they repaired the hip, and then high pressure to move toward something called palliative care. Because you don't want her, being poked and prodded all the time. Move her over here, she'll be comfortable. And what the family wanted was to give her a chance. And said, look, we want her to be comfortable. We want her to not be poked and prodded and all this stuff that happened. But we want her to get rehab. We want her to have a chance to try and get up and to try and move around. We don't want her to sit in this bed and ultimately die. We want her to be moved around. We want her to be at least give her a shot. At least give her a chance to get up and walk out of this hospital. And we were told, oh, absolutely. Absolutely, we understand. So when I see these stories that you've got a health insurer going, hey, we've got an algorithm that says, how much care you should get. We've got an algorithm that a flow chart that tells us, what it is you should be getting. And this United Healthcare Group evidently, repeatedly said, according to this article, that its algorithm, which predicts how long patients will need to stay in rehab, is merely a guidepost for their recovery. But now you've got people who are saying, hey, it's a lot different than what they're saying. What they're saying and what they're doing, two very different things. And that, as I said, 1%. And what Stat came up with is internal documents that showed that United Health, their subsidiary, this Nava Health, set a target for 2023 to keep rehab stays of patients in what? The Medicare Advantage plan within 1%. Now, again, we understand Medicare Advantage is the privatized healthcare plans. See, this is how they get away with this because it's private health insurance. It's not actually Medicare. It's the Medicare Advantage. So the advantage is algorithm. And an algorithm ensures profit, evidently massive profits. Now, according to the report, former employees said missing the target for patients under their watch meant exposing themselves to discipline. So again, this is one of these moments where I come back to, I want union nurses. I want union doctors. I want people who aren't worried about getting fired for doing the right thing. I want people who are going to step up, speak out, and demand that, and be an advocate for patients. Because look, I was fortunate that I was able to go and be with her for those final couple of weeks. And I was pressuring the nurses and people to come try and move her. It was a constant fight and constant battle Ultimately, I lost. But the thing is without a union, without that protection, without that backing, you're opening yourself up to discipline and even termination, regardless of whether it's warranted, whether the Medicare coverage would have covered it. And according to the article, the stringent performance goal was part of a broader effort to reduce expensive nursing home care for frail patients with the privatized Medicare plans. This is according to internal documents. They say the strategy was conceived and executed by former top Medicare officials whose policies became a blueprint for United Health to reap hundreds of millions of dollars annually by shredding the government safety net with payment denials backed by an algorithm. Again, deny, because, hey, they're not going to live long, and what are they going to do? Come back and sue you? And, the article goes into a couple of horror stories. Look, an older woman was, found on the laundry floor by her grandson, had a stroke. And according to the algorithm, 20 days of rehab. That's what this woman, for a stroke, was according to the algorithm, that's what you get. When you look at the reality, the average person, according to the story, who has a severe impairment from a stroke is almost double what the algorithm said. So what do you think they ended up with? This poor woman ended up getting the short end of the stick. But you know what? Profit. Oh, boy. CEO pay. Oh, got to line those pockets. They also said a 78-year-old legally blind man who needed care for a failing heart and kidneys fell in a nursing home, was granted 16 days. Another person, nearing his discharge date for knee surgery, was expected to learn how to butt bump up and down stairs in only a few visits. And you go, how is this helpful? How is this health care? And the thing is if the case managers disagreed and tried to extend the patient's, the number of visits or their stay, again, you're the target. Now, what the article goes into is the final call ultimately is the doctor who reviews all of the information. Someone the patient rarely sees. It's their responsibility. And where do you think I'm going with this? The reality is making that decision, choosing between your job performance and your conscience, choosing between, am I going to have a job or corporate profits? Am I going to be disciplined? Am I going to be let go? Am I going to be harassed from the higher ups? This is the problem that our healthcare system has had in the private hands, because it's all about money now. It's all about the bean counters running things and not actual. I got to tell you, I remember going back through this with my grandmother, and I've been thinking about this all day. And it was, the bedside manner of the doctors who were moving us in this direction was so slick. I mean, they were so good at, it's almost like funeral directors, trying to con you out of your last dime. It was so angering. And when I look back at it, I believed what the doctors were saying. I believed that she was going to get the opportunity to get the therapy and the care that she needed, and I failed her. And that sticks with me, because it's one of those things that I just find really. My aunt and we talk about this occasionally. Again, we let them talk us into that. And why? Well, the profit. They kept trying to push her out of the hospital and into a nursing home. Nothing more we can do here. And we're in a country right now where, again, we're the wealthiest country in the history of civilization at its wealthiest moment. We've got executives and CEOs and the big moneyed people who are making just incredible amounts of wealth. And you look at the CEOs from these big insurance companies, and it's outrageous. The fact that, CEO compensation in this country has gone up 1,200% over the last, 40 years, 45 years, while the typical worker's up to about 15%. And yet the healthcare system that I remember, the doctors that I remember growing up actually cared about their patients. And the profit didn't play into it. There were no algorithms. There were no flow charts that I remember. And I got to tell you, it's time we start reclaiming our healthcare system. And this privatization, the profitization of our health. And understand, we're going to hear in this next presidential election a lot of talk about entitlements. We're going to hear a lot of talk about, Medicare is going broke. Social Security is going broke. We got to make some cuts. We got to push people off longer. We got to do more cost savings because they don't want to do what has to be done, which is one, scrap the cap. You want to save Social Security, scrap the cap. Make rich people pay on every bit of their income and add wealth to this as well so that we have money in the system. And end this privatization scheme of our healthcare system. End it. Because there's a lot of healthcare dollars, a lot of Medicare dollars that are supposed to go into taking care of people that are just lining CEOs and investors' pockets. That's insane. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
During the break, my wife, looked over and said, it wasn't your fault. And look, I understand. It wasn't my fault. I did everything that I thought at the time I could do. But I still blame myself for not knowing better, for not... and again, we do this to ourselves. Because the system is rigged against people. You want to trust, you want to believe that the best interests are front and center, and it's not about the profit. And look, I know a lot of people who work in the healthcare field, and I know they're going to be really ticked at what I've said. But I also know a lot of people who are going to go, yeah, sadly, it's all about counting the beans. It's all about the money. Which is why when you see these nurses going on strike, and you see these nurses unions saying, look, staffing levels are important. When you see them going, look, we want to have a say in the care and how we protect our patients. I believe those folks. Those are the people that we should be heavily depending on and heavily supporting. Just my thoughts. Let's go to the phones. I got Alice on line one. Alice, how are you?
Semi-coherent. Rick, I'm going to tell you what. The only mistake you made was in believing that the doctor was going to tell you the truth. That's the only mistake you made. Because nowadays, we've been brought up to believe that the doctor knows best and believe the doctor. But we conveniently forget that it's not just the doctor, it's also the insurance and the hospital administration, too. And I went through that with my mom when she had her very big stroke back in 2004. And she was in the hospital when she had the stroke, and I'd been telling them for 15 years, and I'm not exaggerating, that she was having strokes, and they'd say, oh, no, it wasn't a stroke. Well, when she had the big stroke, then the doctor said she's been having strokes for years. I was like, I know this. I said this, and everyone told me I was wrong. But she went into, I had to put her in the nursing home for rehab. She was in there for like 4 months. So this 10 days.
Yeah, but Alice, if I could stop you, that was 2004. Now, according to this stat report, you've now got United Healthcare saying your mother would only be entitled to 16 rehab visits, and then cutting you out on your own. Not 4 months,
right.
16 visits. That's it.
Well, what I was going to say was the only thing that saved her on that was a combination of we were able to pay, and she also had the UMW health insurance along with the Medicaid care. But it's ridiculous that, as you say, in this nation, that we always seem to have plenty of money to spend on the war machine or the industrial complex, that we really don't care too much about the health of the people.
Yeah, I'll tell you, it's angering and it's frustrating, and it has to change. And this is something we should be uniting around. But we're too busy worrying about, what did Marjorie Three Names say today? Or, what did Mark Wayne Mullen, he challenged a Teamster leader to a fight. That's what we focus on instead of this kind of stuff that's really important, that affects all of us.
But, we're sort of led there. I actually got a phone call about a half an hour ago. They were doing boy, they called the wrong person. Apparently it was the Republican Party for Pennsylvania or something, and they wanted my opinion on several things about the Republican Party, and I really don't think they were too happy with the answers that I gave them. But, the Republicans are saying, oh, worry about the transgenders. Oh, worry because someone's getting a food stamp. Immigrants at the border, illegal. And that's what everybody's focusing on instead of worrying about, hey, what if I get sick? How am I going to pay my bills? Yeah. And what have you. But you have a good evening, Rick.
Appreciate it, Alice. And, this again goes back to, the sad reality is we have this privatized healthcare system where profit is king, where the money is the motive. Instead of a system that, funded by we the people, run by we the people, owned by we the people, we have a privatized system. And we also have a system set up where our tax dollar takes care of the most vulnerable and the young and the old. And we have a healthcare system in the middle where if you're healthy enough to have a job, then you can have private health insurance. And everyone loves their private health insurance until they need it, or if they need it long term. Acute stuff, most people, it's covered. You're going to be okay. But try having a long-term chronic illness with some of these insurance companies. And it's insane to me that we've got all these insurance companies who have all of these different, these groups. You got to stay within network. Oh, we got co-insurance and we got co-payments and we got this fee and that fee and don't forget about that. And it's all about trying to restrain people from getting the care that they need. And it's crazy to me because we spend more on healthcare than any other country on this planet. And we get worse outcomes for too many people. Now, look, if you're at the top of the game, if you're one of our billionaire folks, if you're one of those CEOs, making 5,000 times what your median income worker is making, yeah, you're going to get the best care in the world. But if you're a working stiff who spent, 40, 50 years, swinging a hammer or driving a truck or working in an office, and you're now relying on Medicare, and you got sold on the Medicare Advantage plans because they have gym memberships, and we get sneakers and we get all kinds of goodies. Oh boy. Without understanding that they deny a lot. And to have these big insurers in your most vulnerable moments deny you what you need is just cruel. And yet, I don't know that it happens to enough people for us to really care. Will this matter? Will somebody think tomorrow this is really important and we've got to do something about it? I don't know. According to the report, the Center for Medicare and Medicaid, Medicare and Medicaid, they're looking into it. But here's the thing, and this is where my problem in all of this is. The problem with our government and private industry is there's a swinging door. The people who are working at Medicare and Medicaid right now are working, in that field. They know that their next job is in the private sector. They know they're going to be able to take the expertise that they learn working for us and learning how to navigate the system. They know at a certain point they can go into the private sector and make 3, 4, 5, 10 times as much as they're making working for we the people. They know that, and they do it. And am I surprised that this scheme, this algorithm, this idea was dreamt up by somebody looking to cash in who was once an employee of we the people? No, I'm not surprised at that at all. And we shouldn't be, because that happens in every agency in our government. Because there's such a cozy relationship between the regulators and the industry. And I keep saying we need to do something about that. We need to have a strong wall. Or look, you can go work in the private sector 5 years after you leave government service. But no, you're infringing on my ability. No. We're just not allowing you to use the knowledge that we've given you to harm our system. What's it going to take? And this is where I keep coming back to. What's it going to take to get the right outrage? Because I was listening to right-wing radio today. There's a lot of outrage. A lot of outrage at Biden. I heard Hunter Biden's name a couple of times. There's a bunch of craziness. There's a bunch of the outrage candy out there that's being force-fed to people. When does this get front page? When does the fact that American working people are vulnerable, 1, 2, 3, 4 paychecks away from real financial trouble, one illness away from financial trouble? I still remember a guy we met during one of our food drives. Was a lifelong conservative. Never missed a day of work in his life, never collected a moment of unemployment, had a heart attack, got sick, lost everything, ended up homeless. Can happen to anybody. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Right back after this. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2006. That was the day mounted police charged 50 janitors and their supporters during a protest in Houston. SEIU's Justice for Janitors campaign had been organizing for years throughout the South and Southwest. Modeled on success achieved in California, SEIU broadened their campaign to Houston and Miami. The union called a month-long strike against the city's largest cleaning companies. Protests and civil disobedience actions continued throughout the strike. Hundreds of strikers routinely marched through the streets of Houston, beating drums and hauling bags of garbage into the middle of intersections to highlight the key services they provided to the city. They were subject to repeated threats of firings and arrests. When police charged at the janitors, it served to turn public support in favor of the strikers. By the end of the month, Tom Balinoff and SEIU Local 1 in Chicago claimed victory for 5,300 Houston janitors. The Chicago local had been central to the 3-year campaign in Houston. Incomes doubled and janitors finally had health insurance, paid vacations, and holidays. The Chicago Tribune detailed the campaign in a November 25th article. The union lobbied building owners and major corporations who held contracts with the cleaning companies. The union worked to gain a foothold among the janitors, sending in seasoned Latino janitors from Chicago to help with organizing. SEIU committed millions of dollars to the organizing drive, setting aside $1 million alone in strike funds. At a victory rally, union leader Flor Aguiar proclaimed, "No one thought a group of poor Latinos from Houston would be able to win anything. But today, we can lift our heads up very high." For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
The far-out right wing's latest political ploy takes extremism to the extreme, escalating their divisive series of culture wars, banning books, suppressing women's rights, whitewashing history, demonizing teachers, etc. Their current idea is to declare war on ideas. Specifically, they're going after state university programs that teach creative arts and social studies, including history, languages, music, civics, literature, economics, theology, and other courses in the humanities that explore ideas, foster free thinking, and expand enlightenment. They say we can't have that. Thus, GOP lawmakers in North Carolina, for example, are eliminating funding for top humanities professors in their universities, shifting those funds to programs in high-tech and engineering that are favored by the corporate hierarchy. Likewise, public universities in Alaska, Florida, Iowa, Kansas, Ohio, and elsewhere are being made to cancel their humanities programs and puff up their departments of business, finance, and marketing. The right-wing shriveled view is that a university education is not about expanding one's horizon and enriching America's democratic society, but solely about training students to fit into a corporate workforce. As a Mississippi Republican official explained, under this minimalized and monetized concept of higher education, state spending on college degree programs will require that they match the needs of the economy. What? Is America nothing but its economy? Is the value of students measured only by the size of their future paychecks? Is public spending only worthy if it serves corporate interests? This is Jim Hightower saying, ironically, the politicos trying to cancel teaching of the humanities are proving that such courses are essential. After all, the humanities strive to humanize today's social order of corporate domination, exploitation, and inequality. The value of that vastly exceeds its price.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I saw a great picture today. And, you know, I haven't seen John Boehner in a long time. But there was a picture of John Boehner with Nicole Kidman. And, you know, look, I got to give him credit. He looks pretty good for an older dude. But he tweeted out the picture of himself with Nicole Kidman. And he said, "I know you can't tell from the picture, but I am blushing," which I thought was hysterical. And it's one of those things, I got to tell you, I always loved John Boehner because I thought he was funny. I politically don't agree with anything that he had to say, but this was a guy who, you know, the old school conservatives that you could get along with, and you could argue about politics, and then you go have a couple of drinks. Or in John Boehner's case, argue while having a couple of drinks, and then go have a couple of drinks, and then have a couple more, and then a couple more, and then a couple more, which is why, again, he's always red. That was the point. I think if you didn't get what his point was, that was it. But I thought it was funny, and it made me think of a better time. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day, our good friend Sarah Burris. She's a reporter at Raw Story, rawstory.com, the website, if you want to take a look at her work. Sarah, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, the reason that John Boehner still looks really good is because he's practically pickled at this point. The dude has had more red wine, I think, than exists in Napa.
And had a glass of it in his hand in the picture as well.
Ah, bless him. Bless him. And now apparently he's a lobbyist for the weed industry.
Yeah, he's a pot guy now.
Which you would think that would mean that he would be drinking less wine, but no. Now he's just doing weed and wine.
Yeah. No,
like, to each his own.
There you go. But I thought it was a funny thing. I mean, I miss politics being funny. Miss it being fun. But then again, here's the thing. We got a guy who's running who wants to destroy democracy, and as Chris Christie said, going to be a felon this spring. Which, Chris Christie seems to be the only Republican really going after him.
He is, and I think he's also one of the only Republicans that's still living in reality at this point, because it seems like the majority of Republicans are either, I think they're probably in two camps. One, they're still afraid of him, or two, they're so far up his butt that they're tickling his throat. And
that's far.
I know, right? That's like really far.
That's far.
See the tonsils. But I think with the majority of people, I mean, even watching those debates with people like Nikki Haley, she's hedging. I mean, everybody is just so pathetically sort of catering to Donald Trump and everything that he needs and wants, and begging for his endorsements, and it's just enabling his bad behavior, and it makes it worse, because I think we should stop feeding the monster, and I think that is what gives him his power, is the more people take him seriously, the more credibility he has.
Now, the thing that gets me is, we keep feeding into it. Like, today they lifted the gag order. I was against putting the gag order on him because it made him look like a victim. It's just one of those things where you go, you can't keep doing this. I mean, granted, he is actively calling for violence. He is actively calling for the destruction of our democracy. He's actively doing a bunch of stuff. But I think by trying to put a gag order on him, I think just makes it worse.
I would say that, but it seems like in the case, so the gag order that was paused for a bit while he appeals is the one that was the most narrow gag order ever, which was basically like, don't expose my clerk's name and identity and face all over the internet and ask people to come and kill her. Like, that's a pretty narrow sort of demand from a judge. And you basically, whenever they had the gag order paused in Washington, they were able to come back, the special counsel was able to come back and say, look what he's doing, and had a bunch of different examples of people that he's attacked and, crazy danger. We literally, just this afternoon, the jury in the case for DePape, who attacked Paul Pelosi, found him guilty on 2 felony counts. He's still facing state charges. And you're telling me you want to, I mean, this guy basically was the epitome of getting up on the stand and say that words inspired him. He described himself as being indoctrinated. He said that he believed the conspiracies, and that is the perfect example of somebody who bought into Donald Trump and then acted. And so, they want to pause this gag order, and I'm like, this dude was just found guilty. Like, what are you thinking?
Now, look, I understand what you're saying. I hear you. I get it. But I just don't know how you enforce it. And again, you're giving, you're adding more fuel to the fire. I guess I'm someone who believes in more speech than less. I struggle with it. Let me go with that. I struggle with this gag order, and I completely understand what you're saying. I get it. But I struggle with it.
I agree. I get where you're coming from in terms of struggling, and I don't know how you necessarily enforce it, but at the same time, I think about the case in Florida when they fined Donald Trump and Helena Haba, almost $1 million for the frivolous lawsuit. That really has calmed down the frivolous lawsuits from him. And so
Yeah, there you go.
maybe that's how much it takes. Maybe just to get it, to work is that somebody's got to be charged with that much money.
Got to follow the money. And speaking of following the money, did you see the ethics report from on George Santos? Evidently, $50,000 he spent on sites like OnlyFans,
which is so gross.
Which is, because me and my son were just having this conversation, going, "Who in their right mind spends money on something like that? Who would pay for that? It's insane." And now we see it's George Santos.
My first thought was, oh my God, this dude has a porn addiction or something like that. But then I started thinking, if he's spending that much money, is he funneling it to somebody? Because if you're going to funnel it through somewhere, that would be the perfect place to do it. Is to pretend like you're paying for services when, you're essentially giving it to somebody else.
Yeah, but is that a campaign? Is that a campaign service? I mean, can you use campaign money for that? I mean, I don't know. I'm struggling with that one too.
I love the idea that he got Botox, but he thought that was a campaign expenditure because, think about it. If all of those politicians out there who really consider their appearance, we had this whole conversation, remember, about Rami McDaniel spending hundreds of thousands of dollars in makeup and hair stuff and at the expense of Republican donors. So, where is that line? Because, his forehead looks great, but is that going to matter in prison?
It might. Depends on who he's looking up at. I'm not going there. Look, when he's out of Congress, he can drive the 27-foot Wienermobile. There's a job for him. He can ride the Wiener.
Oh, you're making my face turn as red as my shirt.
But they also found that he spent $20,000 of campaign money on personal expenses, went right to his bank account, $6,000 in purchases from Ferragamo stores, and actually took some money out at a casino. Again, I don't know that these are campaign related, but here's the thing. He says he's not going to run for re-election, but he's still there.
I wonder, because we have the Supreme Court basically saying that money is speech and we can spend all of this money however the heck we want. And so, I'm curious to hear from the Supreme Court. Does this mean that, it's perfectly acceptable to spend thousands of dollars on Botox and Ferragamo shoes? There was a sneaker day at the Capitol, which makes me wonder, is he passing this off as, oh, well, I had to go buy a new pair of shoes for sneaker day at the Capitol? Is it that? Or it seems like there are so many justifications and so many loopholes that you can just drive a train through it at this point. So and stuff like that, you just got to blame the Supreme Court and be like, you paved this road. You're just driving on it.
You're spot on right. Let's move over to another guy not running for re-election, Joe Manchin. Even Joe Manchin is saying Donald Trump would destroy democracy in America, and yet he's talking about a potential presidential run. And I don't know where or how. Maybe the no labels people are still courting him. Any thoughts?
Well, I know for sure the no labels people are definitely trying to get to him, and they have been for a while. The interview they did, he said that he promises he's not going to be a spoiler candidate. And he said that he doesn't support Donald Trump, but then he says he wants to run for president. And that same time whenever he did his resignation, he said something like, I want to go spend more time with my family, the old, adage. But he mentioned his 10 grandchildren. And I think we were talking about last week or the week before where it was just like, but you want to run for president? The guy's gotten really good at talking out of both sides of his mouth. So it's, I don't want to be a spoiler, but I want to be a presidential candidate. And I want to spend time with my grandchildren, but really not really,
I'm going to go across the country.
Are you getting an RV to go through Iowa? What is this?
Do you think you could borrow Clarence Thomas's RV?
Probably. I bet he could.
Or he's got his own rich guy to buy him an RV. Now the thing is Manchin he reads the tea leaves like anybody else. He knows he didn't stand a snowball's chance in winning re-election, so of course he bailed out.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I feel like everybody's sort of pulling their hair out, being like, "Oh my God, Manchin's not running again. What are we gonna do? The Senate." It's like, dude, the guy wasn't gonna win. Like, calm down. Don't freak out. There are other states that now we can spend money in instead of trying to defend Joe Manchin. We have a legitimate race in Montana and an incredible senator who the people actually love in the state. So we should be spending more money on stuff like that rather than fools like Joe Manchin who aren't really even Democrats.
You listen to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Sarah Burris. Sarah's a reporter at Raw Story, rawstory.com, the website, if you want to take a look at the work that she does. She's got an incredible piece on UFOs. UFOs, Sarah. UFOs.
I know. It's so funny. I'm the UFO beat. It's like every time there's a UFO story, my editor's like, "Hey, I got a story for you." He's like a back alley drug deal. Like, "Hey, you want to see this? I got UFOs for you." And so this is actually a story from a guy who's writing a book about the way that the government has tried to sort of research and better understand UAPs or UFOs, and I think the biggest piece from this book is that putting all of this under the umbrella of the military is a really, really stupid idea.
Yep.
And I mean, yes, there's that whole idea of the military is always going to hide stuff and everything's always going to be like $10,000 more because, it's the military. But the piece that I didn't consider is that when you're talking about UAPs, so much of it is going to be, spy stuff from other countries, and it's going to be national security issues. So putting it under that rubric and also having tech people who actually know something about how that kind of technology works is probably a lot better than a Navy pilot who's just going to be like, "Oh my God, you guys, look at that."
Yeah, right? I got drunk last night and they said, "Whoa."
Exactly. So, that was a big piece of it. He also gave a huge clap to SETI and talked about, like, if we really genuinely care about monitoring, what's going on in the world and the universe and what's beyond the solar system, then we should be funding it. And right. It's a good point.
And we shouldn't be funding it to someone like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or any of them right. to play with their phallic-shaped rockets. It's that simple for me. And speaking of aliens, since I brought up aliens, Marjorie Trainwreck Green was on Piers Morgan. I got to tell you, I'm never a huge Piers Morgan fan, but I got to give him credit here.
Right. I mean, that was like talk about the strangest thing that happened this week is me actually agreeing with something Piers Morgan said. So Three Toes has a new book out where she tries to clean up her, I guess, all of the crappy things she's done and said, like the Jewish space laser. Yeah. And the interview that she did, she basically tries to tell Piers Morgan, "No, that's not what I said. That's not what I said." And so he's like reading it from, the phone or the tablet. And he's like, "No, you talked about the Rothschilds and the space laser that caused the fires in California." And she's like, "That's not what I said. That's not what I was talking about." And he just holds it up. And it's like, it's right here. And she just kept denying it and kept denying it. It's like, wow, that is like straight up Trumpy, right? Like only Trump can get away with saying, don't believe your lying eyes. But it got crazier. Like then she started talking about the 2020 election, and Morgan is like, "No, dude, you lost." And she's like, "Oh man, there's this court case that's going on in Fulton County, and this is a huge breaking news case." And it turns out, so I did some digging trying to figure out what this case was. It's a judge who actually ruled and said, "Yes, I think there's enough evidence to say that there can be security breaches in electronic voting." And the reason that she said that is namely because the Republicans broke into the
system,
Coffee County Register and jacked with the machines. And it's like, okay, that's not how that works.
Again, that was the whole sentence. You had to read the whole sentence to get that. They only read the part that they want to read. It's that simple.
I was laughing so hard, like, come on, you idiot.
Well, there you go. Conspiracy wacko. But Sarah, as always, appreciate the time. Great stuff. Hope people will check out the website, rawstory.com. Make sure you look for Sarah Burris's work. Sarah, thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Have an awesome week, everybody.
You as well, our good friend Sarah Burris. Let's take a quick break. Right back with your thoughts after this. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1982. That Tuesday, the National Football League players ended their 57-day strike. The league scrambled to get the new season going, scheduling games for that very next Sunday. The shortened 9-game season included 2 games played before the walkout, and the rest after the strike ended. The biggest issue that led to the strike was compensation and benefits. The NFL had seen a surge in television revenue with a new 5-year contract worth $2.1 billion. The players asked for 55% of the league's growing profits. The Players Association also wanted a minimum pay scale based on years of service and improvements in health care and retirement benefits. The owners flatly refused. On September 20th, the Green Bay Packers beat the New York Giants in a Monday night football game. The next day, the New York Daily News reported, quote, "For the first time in its 63-year history, labor troubles will throw the NFL for a loss." By a unanimous vote of its executive committee, the league's Players Association yesterday voted to call a strike. The article continued by writing, quote, "The players stressed that they had been forced to call the strike in frustration over what they termed management's twin failures to take them seriously and to bargain in good faith." Sports Illustrated summed up fan sentiments about the strike with a cover headline reading, over the image of a deflated football. Finally, the two sides came to an agreement. The players won raises, bonuses based on years in the league, and severance packages for retiring players. But the gains were far below the union's goals. Bitterness lingered, and 5 years later, the players would be on strike once again. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Let's quick go to the phone lines. I got Terry in Wisconsin on line 2. Terry, how are we doing today, buddy?
Good, Rick. Very good. I got a question for you, Rick. I was having coffee with a guy this morning that I always have coffee with. He mentioned the fact that these raises that have been won by these unions, that it would increase the cost of the product. And I just don't believe that. I mean, there's enough. Look at the CEOs like you talk about. What did you say, 1,200 to 1? Or 1,200 to 1? Or
1,200 to 15.
I forget what you said early in the show here.
Yeah, it was 1,200% since 1978. Workers got 15%.
Uh-huh. So,
no, I don't agree with that either. I mean, the argument is, well, if you're raising the wages, the product's going to go up, and that doesn't have to be the case, because we're supposed to have a competitive market where people compete on price, and maybe we just don't have as much profit for the CEO and for the shareholders. Maybe we start doing things a little bit differently, a little bit more efficiently. I'm sorry if the company's making the kind of profits that the big three were making. A $250 billion over the last decade, they can pay a living wage to the people who actually make the product and do the work. It's that simple. And for me, full stop right there.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Rick. I couldn't agree more.
Appreciate it, Terry.
I don't. You bet. Keep up the good work, Rick.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it. Let's go to Steve in Chicago on line 1. Steve, how we doing today, buddy?
Fine, thank you. So I wanted to raise a couple of points. One, I think you're spot on with regard to Marjorie Taylor Greene's theory with Pierce Morgan. I mean, when confronted by the fact this is Trumpian levels of denial. And, it was amazing because the thing she could fall back on and what she repeatedly did was, well, you know what? I've seen the evidence as a congressperson because, we're supposed to believe that as a congressperson, she's seen some sort of evidence that the rest of us aren't privy to on all of these topics, the Biden's criminal background and conspiracies and all sorts of other nonsense with regard to the election and you name it. So, yeah, like I said, Trumpian levels of denial. Beyond that, I also find it amusing with regard to your last guest in terms of the whole question of UFOs and so forth. And I think she nailed it dead on. I mean, this idea that we hold people up who have perhaps a military background or pilots or something. Okay, those people are not working at the skunk works. Okay, they're not privy to the latest technology that's out there in terms of what the U.S. government or other governments are hiding. So just because you're a pilot does not mean, therefore, then you are qualified to discredit everything that's out there and declare that something must be from another planet. I mean, this is just sort of different level thinking. There's this thing called the Fermi paradox, and Enrico Fermi asked that question in a casual discussion circa 1950. If there's all of this life out there statistically, then where is it? Why can't we find any of it? Well, yeah, but we sort of amended a lot of that in terms of thinking about how rare life might be, and then also life has to develop into intelligent life. And then beyond that, even if it does, the vast distances between habitable worlds in this universe may mean that the universe has a lot of life, but it will never find other life, other intelligent life, because of the vast distances involved. Right. I mean, this isn't Star Trek. There's not even a hypothetical theory as to how we're going to somehow get to light speed, let alone the multiples of light speed that you see introduced in science fiction that allow people to travel huge distances in science fiction movies. So, yeah, I mean, like I said, I think it's fun that people like to think of things that we can't explain. That pie is shrinking smaller and smaller every year as science explains more and more. We used to think all sorts of things were possibly aliens from another world. Now it's less and less, but there are people who want to believe it. And it turns out the psychologists have explained that in the same way that people used to need to believe in angels.
Right.
Well, now for modern society, extraterrestrials are our angels. They're the ones that are going to save us from ourselves. They're going to solve our energy problems, our food issues. They're going to save us from our environmental concerns. Aliens will get here with all the answers, cure all of our problems, let us live forever, because that's how it's going to work. Because we've all seen too many science fiction movies.
And yet Americans believe in science less than they did just a couple of years ago, and even lesser than they did before the pandemic. And yet, I'm struggling with that. But Steve, appreciate. No, go ahead.
And you're absolutely right. I mean, the faith in those institutions has waned, while belief in crazy has gone through the roof. So people love Alex Jones, but Michael Eric Dyson, no, we don't need him. So yeah, crazy.
No, I appreciate it. No, and look, I actually met a flat earther, and so there you have it. No, I did. It was the weirdest thing. He was explaining to me that the earth is flat and how he believes this. And when we were in Niagara Falls over the weekend, we're standing on a bridge and I'm looking out at the water over where the falls go over. And I go, if you're the first guy traveling down here, because we were thinking about it'd be great to whitewater raft through there until you hit that spot where the flat earth just ended and off you went to the end. I can get thinking about that, only we kind of know better now. At least I thought we did. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back.
Climate is changing faster than any time in human history. It is not about saving the planet. It is about saving us humans and many of the other living things that share this planet with us.
U.S. is warming faster than the rest of the globe, and every region is affected, major report warns. U.S. and China agree to work together to displace fossil fuels and tackle the climate crisis. Plus,
along with this assessment, I'm announcing $6 billion in new investments to make communities across the country more resilient to climate change.
Biden administration releases new funding to strengthen climate resilience across the nation.
All of those stories and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
There are a number of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle who still deny climate change.
Is all of them a number? This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen. Wow. A bunch of climate reports this week. None of them very happy.
No, unfortunately they are not. A handful of major climate reports dropped this week in advance of the next round of Paris Climate Agreement negotiations at the end of the month. Together, the reports underscore that the world is far off track from meeting targets to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions from burning fossil fuels that are driving the human-caused climate crisis. The first report from the United Nations warns that national climate plans still remain insufficient to limit the global temperature rise to the 1.5 degrees Celsius aspirational target in the Paris Climate Agreement. Global emissions are predicted to drop just 2% below 2019 levels by 2030, not the 43% reduction needed to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. A different report finds that climate warming gases in the atmosphere reached record highs in 2022. But the biggest of all was the Biden administration's release of the fifth National Climate Assessment, compiled by several federal agencies. It's an exhaustive survey of climate impacts and risks in every corner of the United States. It describes how intensifying climate change is already here, already disrupting lives, the economy, and vital ecosystems, and is, quote, worsening across every region of the United States.
And worse in the United States than it is pretty much everywhere else across the globe.
Yes, overall, the U.S. is warming 60% faster than the rest of the world. And the report delves deep with an interactive atlas to zoom down to every county in the nation. No place in the U.S. is safe from climate change. Extreme heat, precipitation, and flooding events are all increasing in every region, impacting water supplies, crops, local economies, and more. The rate of sea level rise is accelerating. Back-to-back climate disasters are straining communities and ecosystems and hampering economic growth. Extreme climate events now cost the U.S. on average $150 billion a year.
Other than that, how was the play, Mrs. Lincoln?
But the National Climate Assessment also offers hope. It shows how communities in every state are ramping up their response to the climate crisis. And it details a broad array of tools, solutions, and transformational adaptation policies to cut emissions and harden infrastructure for resilience against climate impacts we can no longer avoid. Here's Dr. Leah Stokes, climate policy expert at UC Berkeley, on CNN.
We have the technologies we need. And so all we have to do is deploy them very quickly so that we can get off fossil fuels as fast as possible.
Oh, that's all we have to do.
Also this week, the U.S. and China, the world's two biggest greenhouse gas emitters, agreed at a meeting in California to work together to tackle global warming by ramping up renewable energy and displacing fossil fuels. It is the first time that China agreed to set its own targets to cut all of its climate warming emissions, including the powerful greenhouse gas methane. Finally, this week, President Biden released another $6 billion in new investment from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act to help communities increase their resilience to climate impacts, modernizing the electric grid, upgrading flood controls and drought response, addressing environmental justice for frontline communities, and much more.
It takes time for the investments we're making to be fully materialized, but we just have to keep at it. We need to do more and move faster. We have the tools to do it. In this administration, America will be the place where great science changes what's possible.
It better change it quickly. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. We are off for the Thanksgiving week. Our great thanks to all of you for sticking with us over the past year, and to those of you who help us stay on your public airwaves by stopping by bradblog.com/donate. From both of us to all of you, please have a healthy, happy, and safe holiday. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So this week, there was a conference by the UN on taxation, also talking about their sustainable development goals. And our good friend Morris Pearl was there to participate, to testify, to rub elbows with the folks who are making the choices, the decisions, and the agenda. So that's why I've asked our good friend Morris Pearl to come share some thoughts on the conference on taxes. Morris is the chairman of the Patriotic Millionaires, patrioticmillionaires.org, the website. Morris, thanks for taking time for us.
Yeah, you're welcome, Rick. Great to be on your show.
So walk me through what are we talking about here? What happened during the big taxation talk?
Yeah, I mean, I only wish the people at this meeting were the ones who actually make decisions about policies, but mostly it's the deputy ambassadors from all these different countries talking about how if they just had, the people just paid their taxes and they'd be so much better off. We heard the president of Colombia, who's actually a economics expert, saying most taxes, like 3/4, the people who pay the taxes are the same people who get the benefits. It's like you get benefits when you're going to school, and then when you retire, and in the middle, when you're working, you pay in. And about 3/4 of it is like that. And 1/4 is like taxing the rich and benefiting the poor. But mostly, the people who pay the most are the same people who get the most benefits. So we heard from her. Joseph Stiglitz, the famous author, was there. He was telling us that even when the smaller countries try to invest in green technology, most of the money ends up going to the rich people in the rich countries for patent royalties and fees and usage, because green technology like solar cells are very capital intensive. You have to pay a lot of money to build them, and then you make the savings over the course of years, and it's tough. We had a professor from Yale Law who had been in the Treasury Department supervising the Internal Revenue Service until recently. And she was telling us that there's like 12% people that just don't pay their taxes. And that's what they're trying to do now at the Internal Revenue Service finally. You've seen the thing in the news about Microsoft.
Yeah.
The IRS sent them a bill for $28 billion. And that's basically about the same thing that I've been talking about for a long time, where companies take their intellectual property and move it to some other country. What Microsoft was doing for years, when you had to get a CD to install Windows or Office, they manufactured the CDs offshore. And they claim that's where all the money is made, in the manufacturing facility. And basically, the Internal Revenue Service is trying to claim, the people of the United States are trying to claim, I should say, that that's just a sham. And the money is really made in the United States, where you design the software and create the software, not where you physically manufacture the plastic boxes and put the discs in them.
And where it's sold. I mean, it's where your profit comes from. The consumers are here.
Yeah, most of the money is made in the United States. Clearly. There are a lot of people who want big companies, these multinationals, to add up like all the money they make, and so you have to pay a percentage of that in taxes, and then you have to pay some to each country depending on where your customers are, where you make your money. And in some cases, that'll actually help the big countries like the United States, but it will help the smaller countries a little bit too, because so many of them don't pay any taxes at all in many of these smaller countries. It's just a shame.
So, is there a way to, and I know my right wing friends are going to lose their mind for me saying this, but is there a way to hold these multinational companies accountable and have a multinational, a global tax on these companies who, again, they seek out the lowest tax rates, the most exploitable labor laws, the most exploitable environmental laws? Is there a possibility that you could ever hold them to the fire and enforce some bit of sanity on them?
There's sort of two levels of this. One is that some countries have policies about how the countries are supposed to report their earnings, and some of that is changing. We've agreed on like a minimum tax now for corporations here in the United States. That's some actual progress we've made recently. And some of it is people cheating and sort of claiming that all their money is made in some little country somewhere that has lower tax rates. And both of those, I think some progress is being made. There is more progress being made towards transparency, rules to require reporting of these things. So, I mean, I prefer to be optimistic. I'm depressed about so many things in the world that
it's easy to get depressed about so many things.
Yeah, I'm just going to try to be optimistic about this.
Yeah.
More people are aware of it, and I think some progress is being made.
Now, you brought up this 12% number that, the former IRS person was talking about. 12% of people in this country pay no taxes. Do we have a sense of who those 12% of people are and what kind of revenue would be gained from those 12%?
12% of all the taxes due are not paid, is what she said. Not 12% of the people.
Okay.
12% of the money is not paid. And a lot of that is not the very richest people. Like, I don't think Jeff Bezos is cheating on his taxes because he doesn't have any income. He doesn't need to pay much taxes. If you're a billionaire, you don't really need any income.
Truth.
And I don't think poor people are cheating on their taxes because they don't have much income either. I think it's the people like in the 1% through the 70% area. It's those people near the top who are cheating. And it's not everybody, but some people who have slightly complicated business affairs manage to sort of not report some of their income or have some of their income in a trust or a foreign country or something that's not reported to the Internal Revenue Service, and they just kind of don't bother putting on their tax forms. And there is a lot of cheating. And then, I mean, there are some gray areas like this thing about Microsoft that maybe they're not sort of hiding it. They're just kind of saying that, oh, we really made all of our money in this small island over here someplace. Sorry, you don't get any taxes.
No, they're just figuring out how to make a loophole in the law.
Yeah.
And this is where my real problem was. And the reason that from the beginning I wanted to see Donald Trump's tax returns. I want to see the tax breaks and the loopholes that he uses. Because look, and he admitted that he uses all of them because he claims he's smart. But I think we as working people need to see what's been lobbied for and what kind of loopholes you can drive a truck through to save billions of dollars in taxes that should be paid to get us health care and education and better roads and bridges, and we can go on for days on the things that we could use the resources for.
Well, take a look at our book, Tax the Rich. I know you've got a copy, Rick. Or look at our website at patrioticmillionaires.org, and you can look on Tax the Rich, and you can see we gave like a 20-minute talk exactly on that. I mean, the basic answer to what Donald Trump does is pretty simple, because A, we don't charge taxes on making profits on selling things until you actually get paid. B, we have what's called the 1031 exchange, where if you sell some real estate, but buy some other real estate, you don't have to pay any tax on the first one until you sell the second one, or the third, or the fourth, and you can go on for the rest of your life. That we basically have simple policies in place designed so real estate developers don't have to pay taxes. It's not like you need something complicated. You don't need to hire the most expensive accountant or lawyer or something. It's right there. It's very simple. It's that we don't charge taxes on people buying something and then selling the thing later at a higher price at nearly the same rate that we charge taxes on people who get paid paid a paycheck with hourly wages. Those people pay taxes at a very different rate than people who buy apartments and then sell them. The people that buy and sell real estate have much lower tax rates, and they don't have to pay until they get paid, and they don't have to pay at all if they use their profits on the first deal to invest in the second deal and the third and the fourth, and it can go on forever. And it's not complicated.
No, it's not. And this is where, I come back to, I've had some people complain, that Biden wants to give more money to the IRS and wants more IRS agents. It's just going to mean, that they're going to be snooping in our lives. And I say, no, it's about getting the revenue that we should be coming into our government. But also, I think we do need to look at the tax code and have a major overhaul because it is rigged against people who work for a living.
I mean, I'll tell you, if you're one of the 1%, and within the 1%, if you're one of the 1% of the 1%, so out of our we have roughly 150 million taxpayers. If you're one of the top few thousand, yes, the IRS is planning to look into your affairs more. Those few thousand richest people in the country, yes, those are the people who are worried. And those are the people going to their congressmen and complaining that it's not fair the IRS can hire expensive lawyers now. That's literally what they're saying.
Yeah.
It's not fair the IRS has money to hire the same kind of smart lawyers that we've been hiring for years.
But here's the thing, and this is where the messaging is filtered down to the people that I know. They say that the rich are still going to get away with all that they want because they can't afford the really expensive lawyers, and that by Biden hiring these new agents and more agents, it means that average everyday people are going to be scrutinized even more and harassed and audited and all this more because as we found out over the last several years, the people being audited the most are poor people, which is insane because they don't have anything to audit, but they might get that earned income tax credit, and we can't have any of that.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, they've deliberately made the earned income tax credit complicated enough so that people make mistakes. But yeah, the answer to these rich people who have high-priced lawyers is for the people to have high-priced lawyers too. It's not that complicated. They say that the money they spend on lawyers, they make, in fact, 12 to 1 for people in the 1%, 35 to 1 for people in the top 10th of the 1%.
Wow.
Every dollar they spend on lawyers when auditing the top 10th of 1%, they get back $35. And in the bottom part of the 1%, they get back $12 for every dollar they spend.
Last line of questioning I want to get into, because you said the number is 12% here. How bad is it on the rest across the rest of the globe? Did they get into any of that? I mean, is it worse here? Is it better here? What's the sense?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. There are some places that literally don't have very good tax administration at all. I think here we have pretty good compliance among people who work for a living because they get taxes deducted from their paycheck every single week.
Right.
I think we have poor compliance from the very rich because they don't get deductions. They don't get anyone watching over them.
Well, we will see. Morris, as always, good stuff. I appreciate you taking some time sharing some of your thoughts on the big conference, and I look forward to talking to you again real soon.
Thank you very much, Rick. I'll see you the Thursday after Thanksgiving.
Yes, sir. Our good friend Morris Pearl. Make sure you check out their website, patrioticmillionaires.org. We'll get links out on social media how you can do that. Quick break. Right back with your thoughts. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Just got an email during the break from Randy, who, following up on Terry's call earlier, says you're wrong. You're dead wrong. Wages do increase the costs of building projects. I know, he says. That's the email. I know. And he brought up building projects, which is interesting because it's one of my favorite things to talk about. Because, you know, here in my state, when they were really pushing to do away with prevailing wage, because they said, you know, prevailing wage laws, you know, inflate the cost of labor. They were running around saying that they could literally cut the cost of building projects by 30%. This is what they were saying. That, you know, if they just did away with prevailing wage, they would cut the cost of a new school, a road, whatever. It would cut it by 30%. So, you know, I remember going to my building trades friends and going, you know, is that possible? 30% sounds like a lot because, you know, I got to tell you, it sounds, I don't know. If that's the case, maybe. They sent me the breakdown of a building contract. And the labor costs in building let's say a new school is about 25%. The rest of it are architectural fees, the cost of materials, you know, all the stuff that goes into it. 25% of it's actually working people. 25% is actually the person laying the brick and pouring the concrete and doing the work, running the wires and putting the roof on. It's about 25%. So in order to save 30% on a building project like this, the workers would not only have to work for free, they would have to pay 5% of the cost of the project back into the fund because they're only a quarter of the cost of the building. Yet you had people running around with, you know, the disinformation machine saying, you know, we could save 30%. No, you couldn't. What you could do is you could cheat people out of wages. You could have, you know, transient workers coming through, throwing up shoddy work. You could get unskilled people to do jobs that, you know, skilled people would do much better. You could do that. And you might cheat them out of wages, but you're not going to save money. And that's the weird part in where we are. This idea that, you know, if you get a raise, it's automatically going to make things cost more. You know, if we paid fast food workers a living wage, it means, you know, the price of everything's going to go up. When the reality is, for the most part, when prices go up, it's because corporations want more profit. You know, they don't want to lose the importance of their bottom line because the shareholders are sacrosanct. Now, I go back to August 19th, 2019. You may remember Jamie Dimon and the Business Roundtable came out with this edict that, you know, they've learned from their evil ways. You know, for years they had, you know, focused solely on maximizing shareholder wealth And that's all it was about. It was about, we got to get more profit, got to squeeze the quarter till the eagle screams so that we can, take the last drop of blood out of that eagle and give it off to our billionaire class. They then came out and said, we've learned from the errors of our ways, and we now care. We care about more than just the shareholders. We care about all stakeholders, they said. We care about consumers. We care about communities. And most laughably of all, they claimed they cared about workers and that they were going to help, ensure that workers have the ability to participate in this prosperity. There's all this flowery stuff. And then the pandemic hits and the true reality comes out. And what happened? Well, maximizing shareholder wealth on steroids. So if you want to look at why prices have gone through the roof, it's because they can. It's because corporate America can, because we don't have price controls. There are no more agencies to say you have to petition for rate increases anymore. There's none of that. There's no justifying why they raise the prices. No, they don't have to. They can just do it unilaterally, which is what they did. And what we found out, thanks to Bob Casey in his most recent study, the inflation that happened in the first year after the pandemic, 100% of it was because corporate America said, hey, we can. Because understand, most of the stuff that was sold during the pandemic and there right after was inventory. It didn't cost them any more to make than it did before. They just saw a great opportunity to cash in, to fatten the bottom line. So this argument that they're making of, well, we're paying too high a wages, and that's what's making the cost of a hamburger go up by 6 cents is ridiculous. But the simplicity of their argument is important. The simplicity of 1 + 1 = 2, that's easy math. You get more, it's going to cost me more. That's how they sell this. Completely taking them out of the equation. Never mind the fact that the auto workers gave up massive concessions to keep that industry afloat. Never mind the fact that they gave up pensions and all kinds of two-tier wage systems and all kinds of stuff to keep these companies afloat and get them back to profitability. And over the last decade have pocketed $250 billion in profit. That they then go with a massive slap in the face and buy millions of dollars of their shares back. To do what? Maximize shareholder wealth. It's always amazing to me that working people pit themselves against each other. We don't, the Jay Gould quote of I can pay half the working class to murder the other half. They're not even paying anymore. We're doing it to ourselves. You get a raise, so it's going to hurt me, so you shouldn't get anything. Instead of going, hold on, you got a raise, how do I get one? We used to think like that. There was a generation, and I remember them. They've long since passed, unfortunately. But they used to go, hey, you did better. Hey, how can I do better? You got a new car because you got a raise at work. How do I get a raise at work? Maybe I can get one. And in my mind still goes this way. I'm not jealous of people doing well. I want people to do well. I just believe that having a billionaire class in this country is bad for business. It's bad for society. It's bad for democracy. It's just bad. Because here's the thing. That is wealth that someone else created that they've figured out how to hoard. And I go back to the example of the big three. $250 billion in profit over the last decade. Wages didn't go up but a couple of pennies. The wealth that those workers were creating through the sweat of their brow, the ache of their back, the destruction of their body, that didn't trickle down to them. And finally they stood up and said, we're not taking it anymore. Finally they said, we're going to shut things down until we get a reasonable deal. And we had a number of auto workers here on the program saying the same things. Look, we sacrificed. We tightened the belt. And understand, the prices of vehicles still went up, didn't they? Wages didn't go up. Healthcare benefits didn't go up. Pensions didn't go up. Prices did. Why? $250 billion profit over the last decade. Now, look, I'm not against corporations making a profit. Want them to. And you know why I want them to? So that workers can organize and fight for a piece of the pie. So by saying that somehow these workers who create the wealth, demanding part of it is going to raise costs is just head scratching. But hey, I appreciate the thought. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Right back after this. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1982. That Tuesday, the National Football League players ended their 57-day strike. The league scrambled to get the new season going, scheduling games for that very next Sunday. The shortened 9-game season included 2 games played before the walkout, and the rest after the strike ended. The biggest issue that led to the strike was compensation and benefits. The NFL had seen a surge in television revenue with a new 5-year contract worth $2.1 billion. The players asked for 55% of the league's growing profits. The Players Association also wanted a minimum pay scale based on years of service and improvements in health care and retirement benefits. The owners flatly refused. On September 20th, the Green Bay Packers beat the New York Giants in a Monday night football game. The next day, the New York Daily News reported, quote, "For the first time in its 63-year history, labor troubles will throw the NFL for a loss." By a unanimous vote of its executive committee, the league's Players Association yesterday voted to call a strike. The article continued by writing, quote, "The players stressed that they had been forced to call the strike in frustration over what they termed management's twin failures to take them seriously and to bargain in good faith." Sports Illustrated summed up fan sentiments about the strike with a cover headline reading, over the image of a deflated football. Finally, the two sides came to an agreement. The players won raises, bonuses based on years in the league, and severance packages for retiring players. But the gains were far below the union's goals. Bitterness lingered, and 5 years later, the players would be on strike once again. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
The far-out right wing's latest political ploy takes extremism to the extreme, escalating their divisive series of culture wars, banning books, suppressing women's rights, whitewashing history, demonizing teachers, etc. Their current idea is to declare war on ideas. Specifically, they're going after state university programs that teach creative arts and social studies, including history, languages, music, civics, literature, economics, theology, and other courses in the humanities that explore ideas, foster free thinking, and expand enlightenment. They say we can't have that. Thus, GOP lawmakers in North Carolina, for example, are eliminating funding for top humanities professors in their universities, shifting those funds to programs in high-tech and engineering that are favored by the corporate hierarchy. Likewise, public universities in Alaska, Florida, Iowa, Kansas, Ohio, and elsewhere are being made to cancel their humanities programs and puff up their departments of business, finance, and marketing. The right-wing shriveled view is that a university education is not about expanding one's horizon and enriching America's democratic society, but solely about training students to fit into a corporate workforce. As a Mississippi Republican official explained, under this minimalized and monetized concept of higher education, state spending on college degree programs will require that they match the needs of the economy. What? Is America nothing but its economy? Is the value of students measured only by the size of their future paychecks? Is public spending only worthy if it serves corporate interests? This is Jim Hightower saying, ironically, the politicos trying to cancel teaching of the humanities are proving that such courses are essential. After all, the humanities strive to humanize today's social order of corporate domination, exploitation, and inequality. The value of that vastly exceeds its price.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I hope everyone got out today and adopted a striker, as we talked about the other night, as the Association of Professional Flight Attendants, you know, the union that represents 26,000 flight attendants across the country at American Airlines. They held an informational picket today all across the country. So I'm hoping if you were near one of those places that you got out. And as we've been saying, if there's a strike near you, adopt a striker. Get out there on the picket line, walk with them, talk with them, hear their stories. You know, bring a couple of bucks for the till, bring a bottle of water, a pizza, something, but adopt a striker. And because here's the thing, what we know, strikes work, and strikes work better when the community is involved and people come out and say, hey, we support you and we stand with you. And you know what works even better? Not having to strike, but having people believe you're going to. I look at my Teamster brothers and sisters who did really well at UPS under the thought that, you know what, they may go on strike. Someone believed them. But that's why I've asked Caroline Lucas to come talk with us. Caroline is the executive director of a coalition of Kaiser Permanente unions. Their website, Union Coalition. You may remember you had some 85,000 workers there at Kaiser Permanente, one of the largest healthcare systems in this country. Walk out over a staffing thing. And again, back to where we started. I love union nurses. Caroline, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you so much, Rick, for inviting me. What a pleasure.
So let's talk about your action. I mean, 85,000 workers won an incredible contract because they stood up and said, we're not going to take it anymore. How'd you do that?
You know, Rick, what was sticking in my mind was all of the patients that came out as well. To your point about adopt a striker, we would get asked a lot by the corporate press, well, isn't this going to hurt patients? And what floored me was the outpouring of support from patients who appreciate their union nurses, who appreciate the folks cleaning their hospital rooms, and said, we're here with you. We see how hard you're working. We know you're advocating for us, and we've got your back. So
yeah, I got to tell you, it was one of those things. You know, we had listeners who actually went out and participated because of our adopt a striker call. And they went out there and heard from the nurses, but more importantly, the nurses heard from them. And it's that kind of relationship that I think is so important if we're going to save this healthcare system, which seems to me, and you can correct me if you think I'm wrong, that is just predicated on how much we can squeeze the quarter till the eagle screams for the profiteers to grab every drop of blood out of it.
I don't disagree. So many of our healthcare systems really are making decisions for what makes them money versus what cures people and saves people's lives. So needing to remind, the healthcare executives, our folks aren't, making widgets. They're saving people's lives and they're providing health care. And so we really need you to treat them with the same respect that they show up and treat patients with every single day.
Yeah, and we need healthcare professionals who aren't worried about, hey, how are we going to pay the rent? How am I going to keep the lights on? Hey, if I get sick, how am I going to take care of myself? We need people who are going to focus on the job and taking care of people. And you guys won some really great things in your contract, a $24 minimum wage across the country, $25 in California. That's kind of a big freaking deal.
It is. It's the first healthcare worker minimum wage that a healthcare giant has set across the country. It was a huge deal. To your point, we would hear stories regularly from our frontline healthcare providers who were sleeping in their cars because they were working in places like Los Angeles and couldn't afford on their salaries to rent a place nearby. So life-changing, not just for our healthcare providers and the frontline healthcare workers in our union, but they're for their families, for the generations coming behind them who will have better living because their parents have union jobs that are paying respectful wages.
I started today's show off talking about a story that grabbed my attention by the folks over at STAT. They did an investigative report of United Health, and what they found is, they have this algorithm that determines how much care an elderly patient's going to get, because they're literally trying to squeeze every dime out of the privatized Medicare system. And it's just disgraceful when you look at that the profits come before the health of our most vulnerable. Especially that's the part that bothers me the most. If it were some billionaire who could afford to pay for it out of their pocket, I go, okay, I get that. But you're talking about the most vulnerable people in their most vulnerable moments, and denying them access to care to me is just despicable, which again, I come back to. having union nurses, having people who taking care of their patients is first, front and foremost, the primary goal and responsibility, and not worried about, hey, am I going to get terminated? Am I going to get in trouble? But taking care of people, I got to tell you, that's for me, that's just what has to be.
Rick, you're so right. And all the research supports that union hospitals deliver better outcomes for patients. I think it's because of what you said, that people aren't afraid to speak up and advocate for their patients, to speak truth to power when they see the wrong things happening for the wrong reasons. And also because when you're in a union facility and you have a job where you can afford to pay your bills, you stay. And so you have consistency. You have people who have been in their community with these same group of patients for 10, 15, 20 years and are able to say, hey, Rick, I saw you last week and you don't look as great this week as last week. What's going on? What's happening? They're really invested in their patients and their community. So totally appreciate what you're saying and agree.
No, what the article said is it said, quote, former employees said missing the target, and they had a 1% target of their algorithm, which meant that if they went above 1%, they opened themselves up for discipline. It said former employees said missing the target for patients under their watch meant exposing themselves to discipline, including possible termination, regardless of whether the additional days were justified, whether it was right or not. It didn't matter. You still went over the goal. And that to me is disgraceful.
Yep. It makes me think about all the regulations you see coming down from hospital corporations, limiting the amount of time you can spend in rooms with patients, right? The issue is get more people through faster and faster, not give people the time they need to really do a diagnostic test. One of the things that stuck in my mind was talking to folks in mammography down in San Diego who were saying they used to do 7 biopsies a day. And now we're being scheduled for 14 to 16. Same person, one person, but being asked to see twice as many patients with appointments that were shorter, right? So these high quotas that just don't focus on what the patient needs, but focuses on what the company needs. That's what we're fighting against.
And again, as we consolidate in these big conglomerates, and it's all over the country. I mean, there's no more small community hospitals. There are no more, small town. I used to have a doctor that had 1 or 2 other physicians. It was a small office, now taken up by a huge chain, and the care has, in my view, has diminished badly. And everybody I talk to who's my age is kind of feeling the same thing. The healthcare system has changed in really bad ways. And how do we reclaim that? I mean, look, I love the fact that you got better staffing levels and fought for that. And we need to be doing more of that. But how do we reclaim some of this?
It's about taking back the moral high ground. And that's what makes me so proud of being part of this moment we're in now, where I see workers, not just in healthcare, which is critical, but everywhere, from Starbucks to, I'm in California. Our scientists, our state scientists just went on strike for the first time ever because they say science matters, right? And so frontline workers, period, who are owning their worth and who are saying, we can't continue to be squeezed. We can't continue to be making you money while we can't pay our bills. We have workers who are doing everything right. They're going into industries that we need people in. But if one thing goes wrong in their life, they're out in the streets. There's no safety. There's no margin for error. It's unsustainable.
No, you're spot on right. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show here with Caroline Lucas. She's the executive director of the Coalition of Kaiser Permanente Unions. You can check out their website, unioncoalition.org. We'll get links out on social media. You can take a look at the work that they're doing. This is, for me, and we've talked to a lot of nurses over the years who have had to strike, and a lot of nurses who have organized over the years. Are you seeing more people, given the fact that we're coming out of the pandemic where they were told they were heroes and essential and all of that garbage? Do you see more people in healthcare saying we really need to join together. We really need to unionize, if not for better wages, hours, and conditions for ourselves, but for safety for patients. Are we seeing more?
We are. And while we were on strike, we got letters not just from people who are interested in unionizing, but other folks like in New Jersey. The USW nurses there have been out for 9 weeks, I think, so far on strike. So there's this moment where non-union workers, non-union healthcare workers are saying, man, we need a union to really protect us and to help us deliver the best care possible. And union workers are also saying, gosh, we are ready to take the ultimate action of going on strike. If our voices can't be heard any other way, you'll hear us in the streets. And so it really is a historic moment, and it's a real shot in the arm for unions and workers all over, because when union workers raise the standards, other non-union hospitals or employers are forced to follow to be competitive.
You know, nobody wants to go on strike, and I say this every time. I've been on strike throughout my life. Nobody wants to do it. Sometimes you have to. It's the last arrow in the quiver. And what's always amazing to me, and maybe you can talk to this a little bit, is that, you know, sometimes employers kind of force you into it. And the weird thing is it usually ends up costing them a lot more than had they just agreed to the union's reasonable demands. And I look at the one hospital, I think it was in Massachusetts, I think it was St. Vincent's, where had you given the workers what they wanted, it cost like $5 million. They spent $10 million to fight the workers. And it just seems like it's more about power and control than it is about running a hospital and taking care of patients. I'm curious your thoughts.
I mean, two things. I would say that they were paying the scabs who were coming in, registry workers coming in, $65 an hour for jobs that our folks make $25 an hour to cover, right, to do regularly. So the amount of money they're willing to pay strike breakers was disgusting. And it's just the wrong priorities and the wrong message. So that's number one. But number two, what scares the pants out of me, Rick, is that when we had smaller health systems, that was true. The cost of a strike was concerning enough that would give them pause to do the right thing. But now Kaiser's making $100 million a year, right? So when you go on strike, let's say, I think our strike probably cost them upwards of $30-40 million. But if you're making $100 million a year, that's a drop in the bucket, right? So you're able to weather these huge strikes much more effectively than when you were having less resources at your disposal. And so to your point about the hospital consolidations, that's what terrifies me is, I'm sorry, I said $100 million. They're making $1 billion this year. I apologize for the misspeak. That many zeros, you start getting fuzzy, right? A nonprofit healthcare system on track to clear $1 billion, right? So you lose $40 million in a strike, and you're kind of like, I just changed my couch cushions, right?
Yeah, anymore, a lot of fingers.
Yeah, it's a lot of fingers and toes, right? You no longer has the same kind of deterrent impact when you're speaking with that level of financial clout.
Now, you say $1 billion they're going to make in profit. They're a nonprofit, right?
Yes. They're a nonprofit who made money during the course of the pandemic. So we bargained with them in 2019, and they told us in 2019, gosh, we don't have much money, we're broke. They had tens of billions of dollars in reserves at that point. They doubled their net worth over the course of 4 years during the worst pandemic we've seen in any of our lifetimes, and came to us this year and again said, oh gosh, we're really struggling, we don't have money. So I was making jokes. I want to be broke like Kaiser's broke with $65 billion in reserves. I want to be that kind of broke.
Yeah, I want to be that kind of broke too. How do I do that? Oh yeah, start a nonprofit healthcare.
Sign me up.
It's just, it really is quite remarkable if you think about it. So last line of questioning I've got for you, because, you know, this fight never ends. The insatiable appetite for more from our corporateers never seems to end. I think it was the CEO of Caterpillar a number of years ago who, when asked, how much is enough, said it's never enough. I always want more. I always want that next quarter. So if I can cheat a worker out of a quarter, I'm going to do that. What is the next fight coming up?
The next fight coming up is to hold this giant to its promises. Right? It's one thing to get a contract and a piece of paper, but unless people live up to those commitments, and we see this all the time with, the National Labor Relations Board getting disputes and arbitrations because, corporations break the law. They break the law, flagrantly. So our contract frequently also gets broken. And so how do you hold people accountable? Because the best agreement is only worth paper if it's not enforced. So keeping workers with their eye on the prize of not just getting the agreement, but having a living agreement, right? Seeing those things come into play. Reaching out and building solidarity with our brothers and sisters, both union and non-union, who are fighting the same fight, who are facing the same kind of corporate giants in healthcare, who are being squeezed, as you put it. And then I will say for Kaiser that their premise, their mission when they started, really was pretty visionary, and they have revolutionized healthcare in the concept of a one-stop insurance and healthcare provider focused on preventative care. And so I always say, your union is supposed to be your partner appealing to your better half, right? If you are a nonprofit, your union workforce should be the ones that remind you of that and say, you are here for the patient. You are here for the patient, because somebody has to speak for the patient. The dollars speak for themselves, right? And so reminding Kaiser bosses that's not enough just to say the right thing. You got to walk that talk. So holding folks honest for the next 4 years while we build this labor movement, while we build our communities, that's a lot of work, and we're looking forward to diving in on it.
Well, good on you. Good on the success you've had thus far. Good on your members for saying enough is enough, and I wish you guys the best. I hope you'll come back and share some more thoughts down the road as you continue to organize our hospitals and make sure that patients at least get a fair shake.
Would love to. And Rick, hats off to you for the work that you do and for allowing, average people this platform to amplify their voices. Really just kudos.
Thanks so much, Caroline. Appreciate the time.
Thank you. Have a good night.
I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Remember, check out the website, unioncoalition.org. You'll get some information there. Right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1798. That was the day Kentucky became the first state to nullify an act of the United States Congress. The federal government had passed the Alien and Sedition Acts during the presidency of John Adams. These laws were passed as a reaction to the French Revolution and an undeclared naval war with France. These acts had several consequences. They increased the residency requirement for American citizenship from 5 years to 14. They allowed the president to imprison or deport immigrants considered to be dangerous to the peace and safety of the United States. And they effectively limited speech, which was critical of the federal government. Kentucky argued that states had the right to declare unconstitutional any acts of Congress that were not authorized by the Constitution. There was much uproar by other states due to Kentucky's nullification stance. These two acts were eventually allowed to expire a few years later in 1800 and 1801, but they were the forerunner for later federal laws that would be wielded against the labor movement. The Espionage and Sedition Acts, which were passed in 1917 and 1918 during the U.S. involvement in World War I, echoed much of the same spirit of the earlier acts. Under these new laws, in July 1917, nearly 1,200 strikers at the Phelps Dodge copper mine in Arizona, many of them of Mexican descent, were loaded onto railroad cattle cars without food or water and left in the New Mexico desert. In September that same year, the Justice Department staged massive raids on the Industrial Workers of the World offices, arresting 169 union leaders. In 1918, labor leader Eugene V. Debs was in prison for opposing the United States' entry into World War I. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com. Back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I got to tell you, you look at the victory that they had out there on across the. Well, actually, I keep saying out there like it's California, but it's really all across the country. Kaiser Permanente is a huge corporation. 85,000 workers, and I see this a lot in our neck of the woods. You've got nonprofit systems that are the insurer and the hospital. This was the model. And look, it is visionary, saying, look, come on with us and you'll get the care that you need. But the problem is that mission often falls down when it comes down to counting the dollars. And that's where I struggle, because, even here, you've got just so much hoarding. I guess that's the only word I can come up with. Sad reality. Also sad reality, it's being reported by Axios that a third of the newspapers that we have right now will be gone next year. They report that the decline of local newspapers accelerated so rapidly in 2023 that they now believe we'll have lost a third of newspapers as of 2005 by the end of next year, rather than 2025 as originally predicted. You stop and you think about local news. You stop and think about, I remember the local newspapers that had local reporters that actually covered things in your community. Those are mostly gone because they're labor intensive. There's not a lot of money to be made in them now, but they are, I believe, an important need. And we're in a moment where the moneyed interests, and I keep coming back to this because it's part of the reason that we're no longer doing live radio, is it comes down to funding. It comes down to the fact that the billionaires are funding massively their message. It's the reality. The right has funded their message massively. And anything else gets drowned out. Now, I started this program 18 years ago with the thought that you got to balance the airwaves. Nobody's absolutely right. Nobody's absolutely wrong. I started it naively, believing that we could start a debate and a discussion where better ideas would come forth. And what I've watched over the last 18 years is the right wing has grown much more powerful. Their message has gotten much crazier. And the country has gone to an extreme that 18 years ago, if you'd have told me that's where we'd have headed, I probably wouldn't have started this. I naively believed that you could have an honest discussion. And what I learned over the time that I've been doing this is the moneyed interests get what they want. And working people always get the short end of the stick. And my frustration has been that even when you talk to working people about, hey, that's a billionaire funded front group that is pushing their agenda. Think anything coming out of the state policy network. Here in my state, the Commonwealth Foundation. Think of any of the think tanks that are in states across this country, because there's at least one in every state funded by billionaires, by the Koch brothers and their ilk, the American for Prosperities and all of those groups. When the Tea Party was running around, funded by billionaires. And you go, when do working people get their message heard? A lot of the healthcare stuff. When you hear people talking about Medicare for all, saying, look, we need to have a single payer system. We need to have one big giant pool and have some say through our legislature, through our government, on who can be denied, what can be denied, and be transparent about it. The insurance industry loses their mind and lobbies like crazy to get their machine working. And the right-wing spin machine takes all of the focus group tested, think tank approved messaging, and they blare it out. And they've got really compelling stories why we can't have a single payer system, why we can't ensure that Granny gets the care that she needs, why this algorithm that United Health is using is necessary to keep down costs. And the buzzword being necessary to keep down costs, not the fact that Granny's going to die earlier. And I go back to my grandmother. She died sooner than she had to. But we have a system that never gave her a chance. And as one of her only advocates, I carry that responsibility that I didn't do enough because I believed the system. This is why we need to have much more oversight. Why we need to have advocate nurses who are going to, who are willing to stand up and say, no, we can do better. And why we need better politicians. So when we think about voting next time around, think about what really matters, what issues really matter, and not what hat we're wearing. What policies they bring, what ideas they bring that are going to make our lives better. That's my hope. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. If you don't subscribe, subscribe. Simple. It'll always be there. Appreciate you tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people